Okay, if you've ever been near a hospital when an air ambulance is coming in for a landing, you know just how powerful these jets and helicopters can be. The sound of rushing engines and pulsing rotors seem to fill the air with noise and make everything shake around you. While many people have experienced these impressive sights and sounds of air ambulances, very few people have actually been in those situations themselves. So today we're going to bring you in to the behind the scenes and in the world of air ambulance. Stay tuned. This is the Jet Set Podcast, and I'm your host, Chris Kiocho. This show is your ticket into the world of general and business aviation. You're going to want to stay tuned, and welcome aboard. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode. Today, I have a man that has over 30 years of medical experience. He is a flight paramedic that has been flying for the last 12 years. He's another American badass and veteran that I had the honor and privilege to serve with in the sands of Afghanistan doing medevac. He's a Harley-riding guardian angel. Welcome, Bernie Copeland.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Bernie, my man, how are you today?
I am doing great.
Where are you at right now?
I am in a little town called Byrdstown, Tennessee.
Byrdstown, is that Middle Tennessee?
It is Middle Tennessee, up on the Tennessee-Kentucky line.
Tennessee, I can tell by the twang, and again, you haven't lost it. We
Yeah.
For everybody listening, Bernie and I spent 2000, was it 11 or 12?
12.
2012. Sorry, a few things have happened since since then. Bernie and I spent 2012 in the southwestern region of Afghanistan, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, we flew medevac, but we'll get into those stories later.
Okay.
Before we get into all these great stories, Bernie, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and how you got into the medical field, because I mentioned you've got 30 years of medical experience. And by the way, for those listening, like, Bernie doesn't look like he's been in the medical field for 30 years. I don't know what this guy's fountain of youth is, but I need to be drinking some of that Tennessee whiskey, I guess, right?
Tennessee White Lightning.
Awesome, Bernie. So tell me how you got in the medical field. What's your background? What's your story?
Well, it's kind of interesting how I got in the medical field, actually. I was going to college, was a sociology major. Had to write a senior thesis. Had to be able to interview people who worked in occupation and people who interacted with those people. And I had some friends that worked in EMS on an ambulance. So I thought, man, that'd be great to do an interview with them, because I knew they would let me ride on the ambulance with them as they went out on calls and stuff. And I could talk to their patients and interview their patients. And so I went out with them, done that, got hooked, knew that was my calling, and actually dropped out of school and became a paramedic.
You dropped out of school to go do this because you were exposed to this and you're like, oh my God, this is me. This is what I was put on this planet to do.
Absolutely. This was my life. So,
how old were you at this point?
I was 22.
Okay, so it's not like you were like high school and dropping out of high school. It was
No. I dropped out of college.
Yeah. You know what?
So,
hey, it's okay. You know who else dropped out of college? There's a lot of billionaires who dropped out of college that went on to do great things, like yourself.
Absolutely. I'm just not a billionaire.
So you got into the medical stuff, and what was that progression like? What would you do, and eventually talk to us how that eventually led to getting into air ambulance. At what point did that come along? So paint us that picture.
Okay, when I first got into EMS working on the ambulance, I live in a very rural area. So I'm like 2 hours from the closest city that's got a level 1 trauma center. When I first got involved in EMS, there was wasn't any air medical really close by. I mean, Nashville, Tennessee had some, but it took them 45 minutes to an hour to get to it, so we never used them. We would just always ground transport everybody. Then in around early 2000, the company I worked for put a air ambulance about 15 miles from where I lived. So I'm like, I got the bug and I really wanted to fly, with them. Ended up deploying to Iraq in 2004. I got back in '05, put in an application, and got hired with them in '06. Been flying ever since.
To 2006. What was it about flying that intrigued you so much?
Uh, the thing that intrigued me about flying is usually your top people, your top paramedics, your top nurses, they're all involved with all critical patients. And that was what intrigued me about flying is I wanted to take care of the worst patients. And so being a flight medic was how I could do that.
Yeah, so the top of your game. Obviously, it's challenging enough, I would imagine, in an ER room or some of those other situations. But now, like in an ambulance, there's a whole lot of other constraints. To talk to us about that. So, actually, paint the picture for us. Again, for those that might not be familiar with air ambulance, what is air ambulance in your opinion, and tell us what that's like.
Uh, Air ambulances, you have two different types. You have rotor wing, which is helicopters, and you have fixed wings, which is airplanes. Uh, I fly on rotor wing. We do seam flights where we'll fly and actually land on the interstate or roadway or somebody's cow pasture and pick up a patient, whether it be a bad car wreck or a stroke patient or somebody having a heart attack. And then we also fly into hospitals, into little hospitals, and pick up a patient out of there, and we'll transport them to the major trauma centers or a major cardiac hospital. You'd be amazed. We go into some of these small hospitals, and even though you have a doctor there, as soon as we walk through the door, they're like, "Thank God you have arrived," and they'll just they're like, "The patient's all yours. Just please get them out of here. Do something for them," And we have doctors who'll show us X-rays and CTs and stuff, and I don't have a clue what I'm looking at is on a CT, but they think I'm a radiologist, because and they don't have a clue either. That's the amazing part. So
So when you say okay, so you're in Middle Tennessee, so obviously this is a lot of
yeah,
rural area. Does this stuff
yeah.
happen in more densely populated areas across the country?
Of course, I have a position where I fly in 14 different states, so I get to see a little bit of everything in my area. Um, but yeah, when you get into rural areas, you really see this a lot. Uh, but every once in a while, we'll actually get called to transport a patient out of a level one trauma center or cardiac hospital to another cardiac place or another trauma center. That doesn't happen very much, but we do get that call every once in a while also.
Yeah, what's the area you cover? You said 14 states. What's that coverage look like?
Okay, I cover 14 states. I'm Ohio, West Virginia, down to Georgia, over to Texas, Oklahoma, Iowa, Illinois. So it's just a pretty big chunk southeast, Midwest area.
Now, do you float or are you permanently based in one location? What's that logistics look like?
Okay, I have a position where I float. I work 2 weeks on, and I'm 2 weeks off. And the main component of my job is I go into a new area, help set up a brand new rotor wing base, and get it established in that area. And then I'll also help train new nurses that's going to be flying there, train them how to be a flight nurse. But I also go into other areas and backfill if they're short on people.
Okay. And explain to me again the difference between a level one trauma center or the other trauma centers. What's the classification of that?
Okay, you have different classifications of trauma centers by the American College of Surgeons. A level one trauma center is they have in-house 24 hours a day. They have neurosurgeons, they have trauma surgeons, also have orthopedic surgeons. And so a level two trauma center is pretty much the same as a level one, except a level one is a teaching center, so you have all your residents in it. And a level two does not have residents in it. That's the big difference between a level one and a level two. Then when you get to level three, they don't have neurologists in house and so forth.
Gotcha. So what's a typical describe to us what a typical day in your job consists of? And so it sounds a little different from an actual just staff person because you said you're doing some teaching, you're setting up. Can you maybe talk through both of those? Like, so
Okay.
in your flight team, what a normal day is for those guys, whether it be pilots or flight nurses, and then yourself in particular.
Okay. A normal day for a flight crew is, of course, like our shift change is 7 a.m. We usually get there by 6:45, 6:30 to 6:45. The first thing the pilot does when he comes in is he goes to the aircraft, does a pre-flight of the aircraft, goes over everything, makes sure that everything is good to go in the helicopter mechanical wise to fly. Same thing as a med crew. When we come in, we go over all of our medical equipment, check everything off, make sure we have everything in the aircraft we're supposed to have. Make sure that all of our electronic equipment, our cardiac monitor, our ventilator, everything like that works like it's supposed to. Also check and make sure we have plenty of oxygen on board. After we get those checks done, the pilot will sit us down. He will give us our crew brief in the morning. He'll go over weather conditions for the day. He'll go over the capabilities of the aircraft that day. He also goes over with, how big a patient we can carry that day. With a helicopter, you're limited by patient weight. By weight. So you have a gross weight of the aircraft and how much capabilities of the aircraft, how much it can carry and stuff. And then we figure up exactly how much the weight is per patient that we can carry that day. And he goes over all that with us that morning. Then we usually, med crew, after that, we'll go out, we'll start doing some training, daily training to better our skills, make sure we can still do certain skills like intubation of mannequins and stuff like that to start the morning. And then we just kind of sit and wait for a call.
Okay, so like that firehouse type feeling, right?
Yes, it is. It is.
Now, you had mentioned earlier in your introduction again that you wanted to like work with the worst case scenarios. I mean, so what type of medical professional do you have to be to want to be in working in this environment, these type of conditions?
Of course, our flight crews consist of a paramedic and an RN. The RN to fly has a minimum of 3 years experience either in ICU or an ER. Paramedic has to have a minimum experience of 3 years working on an ambulance, and then you have to have certain courses to fly. You got to have like all the paramedics, we have to have what's called a certified flight medic rating, and it's a test you have to take. It's an extremely hard test. And nurses are the same way. They have to carry an advanced credential, either a critical emergency nurse certificate, or they have to carry a certified flight nurse certificate one as well.
Okay. Can you talk to us more about the training involved for both nurses and paramedics?
I can. Like I said, paramedics, you have to have a minimum of 3 years as a paramedic on an ambulance. Paramedic school is about 18 months long. Nursing school, they can do an associate's program, which is 2 years long, or they can do a bachelor's program, which is 4 years long. And then they have to have 3 years minimum experience also. The team I work on, all of our people has a minimum of 15 years experience as a medic or a nurse before they ever got the job flying.
Nice. So that's obviously a lot of, it seems like a big investment, right? But
Right.
Now talk to me, aside from training, like personality wise, what's it take to be in this type of environment? Because again, you had mentioned we know like there's regular hospitals or facilities for check-ins, and then there's the ER. But then this seems like a whole different ballgame. What type of personality does it take to be not only like an ER, a critical care, medical professional, but this air ambulance stuff?
Your typical flight crew all have type A personalities, but we're also, and it's kind of sad to say in a way, but we're also customer oriented. So we have to be very personable, when you go into the ERs or, you go into the back of an ambulance, because those crews, those ambulance crews that call us, or those little emergency rooms that call us, they're having one of the worst days of their life, and they've got a horrible patient that they want out of there. And the last thing they want is a crew to come in and talk down to them, or, not smile at them, not be nice to them. So we've got to be, I mean, we all have type A personalities, but we all have to be very personable and friendly. And
Yeah, I mean, everything's like a customer service or a service type thing. You've got to look at that, and to me, I think that's just part of the golden rule, right? You treat people the way
right,
you want to be treated, but
right.
it seems again it's even more critical in your situation. What? Tell me, what's the hardest part of your job?
The hardest part of my job is dealing with small children. You know, we don't deal with small children a whole lot, so that makes it harder when we do have a really critical injured infant, or small child. And of course, I mean, I'm a dad, got 2 kids, and I'm also a grandfather now, got a grandbaby and another one on the way. So, it really affects me to pick up a small child.
Yeah, how do you work through that?
Uh, when I pick somebody up, my training kicks in, and I'm able to zone out all my thought processes of that. Hey, that's a kid that looks like my kid, and so I'm very goal driven on treating and taking care of my patients. So I treat them the same way, and afterwards, and we'll sit and talk about, as a crew, we'll sit and debrief and talk about, what happened on the flight, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's first responders and medical personnel. You guys are a very special breed, and I know for myself and probably all our listeners, we're very thankful for people like you. So just transition from kind of like the deep somber stuff. What's the funniest thing that's ever happened in your line
Uh,
of work?
oh, the funniest thing that's ever happened? It's
Yeah.
I don't know. We've actually, one of the funniest things that actually had happened last week. Uh, we landed at the wrong helipad, dropping a patient off.
Oh, wait. You landed at the wrong helipad.
Right. We landed at a hospital that had they had a rooftop pad and they had a ground pad. And we had never been to this facility before, and we landed on the rooftop pad, got out, got the patient unloaded. The security met us, and they're like, "You're not supposed to land on this pad. You're supposed to land on the ground pad."
But
And
that doesn't make sense. You're a helicopter, and you landed
right.
on the rooftop pad, not the ground pad. What? So what?
So
What happened? Did you guys have to load them back up and fly down
now,
to the?
now they let us take them down in the elevator, and it was like a mile walk through a maze to get to the ER from there. But uh, the rooftop pad is for OBs only, and they didn't tell us that, So
So it wasn't really anybody's fault. It was just probably just
yeah,
a miscommunication.
miscommunication. Yeah,
And obviously that probably doesn't happen often, right?
it actually happens quite a bit. Uh,
Diamond out everybody. It happens quite a
yeah,
bit. But again, nothing critical where it's
right, right.
altering
Yeah,
the patient care.
no,
Oh
no.
man. So we discussed earlier too that we spent time in Afghanistan together, and you coming in from I guess the civilian world into the military and then back out now. Talk to me about that transition from military, and I think in your case too, you were very fortunate that you were able to do what you did in the military back in the civilian world. What advice or recommendations would you give to transitioning military personnel, probably in particular in the medical field, that are looking to transition and how they can get into something in the line of work that you're doing currently?
Okay, the best advice I can give, this, unfortunately, a lot of civilian people doesn't recognize
Hold on,
the
Bernie, real quick.
military
Can you,
training.
Bernie, real quick, because the internet got
Yeah.
slowed up there for a second. Um, so I'll ask you the question again, and then I'll let you answer.
Okay.
So what is here? I'll just answer the question right now. So having done the transition from the military, you've been very
Yeah.
fortunate because what you did in the military, you're doing in the civilian space now. And you had a unique path because you were already doing the medical stuff before the military. But what advice would you give to those transitioning military personnel that are coming out of the military, maybe in particular in the medical branches, that want to come in and do something along your line of work?
My recommendation would be before they ever come out of the military is to make sure they have their proper licensure, like their paramedic license. Uh, and that's a requirement now for like the medevac medics for dust off now, is they have to have the civilian National Registry paramedic now, which didn't happen up until 2013, I think it was. But the big thing is make sure that they have all their credentials like that before they get out of the military. It makes it really easy to transition and get their state license, whatever state you're going to be practicing in.
Okay.
Uh,
And where do they what resources, or where would you advise that they go to maybe start knocking on doors and networking and finding these opportunities?
what if they're looking for opportunities to be in the medical field on the civilian side, is to look at whatever area they're going to go to. Uh, just do a Google research of EMSs that are hiring in those areas, what requirements they have. Uh, get online for whatever state they're going to go to and look at the state EMS website to see what they have to do to get reciprocity for that state to get their license. And most ground EMSs will hire people that's got minimal experience on the civilian side and get that experience. We have several people that I work with now on the flight side who were civilian, or not civilian, but we're military flight medics as well. A couple of our guys in Texas were Texas flight medics that transitioned over very easily just because of their military experience of flying in the military.
Yeah. So you've seen over the years, you've probably seen some things change. Where do you see the industry, in particular, like with air ambulance? Where do you see that evolving? Where do you see that going over the next 10 to 20 years?
There've been a lot of evolution in the flight medicine world in the last 12 years. We get more and more advanced credentials. You're seeing now on helicopters. We're having the capabilities doing ultrasounds on the helicopter to see if somebody's got any internal bleeding, which makes it quicker to get them into surgery once you get them to like a level 1 trauma center. The civilian helicopters are starting to carry blood on them now that they learned from our experience in 2012. Being in Afghanistan, we was the first Army medevac unit to carry blood products.
That was a great accomplishment for our unit, by the way.
It really was. I mean, the 25th took credit for it, but it was Charlie 169 that done it. And there's a huge study done on it and the benefits of it. So that's carried over in the civilian world now. And you're starting to see all helicopters carry blood products.
Yeah, is it so? Aside from the credentials, you guys getting more and more advanced, is the technology or the machines getting more sophisticated? Because I'm not in the medical field, so I don't know. Like, I can imagine, like before, like computers used to be the size of rooms, and now we have these incredible machines in the palm of our hands called iPhones, right? Is the same thing happening in the medical world?
Absolutely, it is. You're getting better heart monitors, better capabilities doing EKGs. We are able to transmit a EKG of a patient, Bluetooth it to whatever hospital we're going into, so the doctor can look at that before we ever get there with them. Our ventilators we're carrying on the aircraft are getting better and better. It's almost like they're almost the ventilator quality that they have in the ICUs and ERs now, which are still like a huge machine, but ours weighs like 7 or 8 pounds, and like I say, all that stuff gets better and smaller and better care for the patient.
Nice. What's your favorite tool that you use in your line of work? And maybe that's a headset or your helmet or a knee board software. What's your favorite tool to use in your job?
Uh, you know, and it kind of caveats on the equipment we carry. Uh, I love to be able to take somebody's airway and intubate them. So I use what's called a laryngoscope, and we have video laryngoscopes now that it's like a big screen on it. So when you put it in their mouth to find the vocal cords, you've got this great view. It's like a 5-inch screen with a view on it. So you can really see the vocal cords. It makes the intubation really, really easy. So that's my favorite tool.
What would require you to intubate somebody?
If somebody is having extreme breathing difficulties, we can intubate them so it helps ease their work of breathing, and we just put them on a ventilator and breathe for them. And the same way, if they've been in a bad car wreck or had a bad head injury, and they're not able to protect their airway for some reason, we can breathe for them and protect their airway and give their body a little rest.
Gotcha. Um, what do you wish you'd known before you started this line of work? If there was little young Bernie again or somebody else that's aspiring to do this, what would you wish you had known, or what pieces of advice can you give them that you'd wish you'd known before you got going down this path?
I wish I'd known. Being a flight paramedic is an awesome job, but I wish I'd have known that I should have really went the nursing route. We both do the same exact job on the helicopter. There's no differentiation. We can both chart the same. We can both give the same medicines, do everything. Just nurses make about $7 to $10 an hour more.
Making that money, right?
That's it.
Hey, so word of advice: don't drop out of school. Stay in school, get your education, and then go on this path, right?
Absolutely.
Nice. So you floating around to the different locations, is it the same aircraft you work on each time? Are you ever in fixed wing?
Yeah. My company has fixed wings. I've not flown on a fixed wing yet, but I have flown on the primary aircraft we've flown is Bell 206 Jet Ranger helicopter. That's usually what I fly on, but I've also flown on an A-Star, and I've also flown on a Bell 407, which is a little bit bigger than a Jet Ranger.
Nice. Okay, so for the people that aren't familiar with those aircraft, talk us through the configuration of what your air ambulance and your Bell 206 helicopter is unique. Talk to us about that one.
Okay, the 206, Bell made it, started it back in the 60s, was used extensively by the military in Vietnam. It's a well established airframe. It's got millions and millions of hours on that particular airframe. Has a outstanding safety record. The 206 it's a small aircraft. We carry, like I say, you have a patient, pilot, nurse, and medic on board. So but it's a very small, so you're in very tight quarters. But it's awesome aircraft to fly on.
Is that your favorite aircraft to work on?
No, actually, I like the 407 the best.
Just because it's got a little more space, right?
It's 8 inches wider, but other than that, it's not really any bigger than the 206. But the 206 cruises about 105 knots, and the 407 cruises 130 knots. So it's just a little bit faster.
But nothing beats a UH-60 Blackhawk, right?
That's right. I would fly on one of those every day of the week if I could.
Oh man. Well, hey Bernie, this was incredible. Thank you for sharing that tidbits of us. Do you have any questions for me, or do you have any anything you want to specifically talk about? I've asked you a lot of questions.
I don't really have any specific questions. You mentioned different stories and stuff. I've got a cool story. I flew a young lady about 3-4 years ago, Really, really bad car wreck, severe head trauma. Pretty much just it crushed her skull, and we we'd been to the flight. We were in Nashville. We was on our way back to our base, and we heard them dispatch another helicopter to the car wreck scene. And we were actually about 5 minutes from the car wreck scene when they dispatched another helicopter, and we just like, hey, we're right here and we can take this flight, So they're like, well, absolutely. We landed on the scene, got in the back of the ambulance. The girl was extremely combative. EMS were overwhelmed with her because of all of her head trauma and facial injuries. So we got her intubated and stuff, and we flew her to Nashville to a trauma center, to Vanderbilt Children's Hospital. They really didn't expect her to live. I went and seen her like a week after she was in a trauma center, and she was still on the ventilator and everything. But they were trying to wean her off of it, and she would get really combative. And as soon as she seen me, she wanted to know how she got there. And that was the first time she'd ever communicated with them, the weeks that she was there. But anyway, she, like a couple weeks later, she sit up in bed and told her nurse every detail of the wreck, where she would sit in the car, everything about them running off the road. But she told them about me working on her and stuff specifically, or she remembered everything I'd done in the back of the ambulance. And now she has no memory of that whatsoever. Doesn't remember the next day. She just told the nurse that one time, and that's it. That's the only memory she has of it now. But it's really neat. She come to see me when she got out of the hospital. And then like 2 years later, when she graduated high school, she just sent me a message, and she's like, hey, I'm getting ready to graduate. The only thing I want for graduation is you just to come to my high school graduation. And I'm like, absolutely, I'll be there, So I drove 3 hours to watch her graduate high school, and it's just a really neat deal.
What a fantastic story. Now, is that common for you to follow up with patients or to have that interaction?
I really do try to follow up with patients when I can. It's really hard to because I float around, I just happened to be flying in Tennessee when I picked her up, so it was a little bit easier for me to follow up with her. But yeah, I do try to follow up with all my patients I can.
You're a living, breathing guardian angel. Like I said, that's incredible. And man, I'm sure that girl and her family is forever grateful for everything you and the team did that day.
Oh, they are, and it's she's one of the true times I can honestly say if we hadn't been there when we was, she would have died. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. So is this the most rewarding part of your job?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Man, that's you get to witness miracles almost every single day, right?
Absolutely, we do.
Well,
yeah, it's just,
no, go
just
ahead.
having
Sorry,
somebody
to interrupt you.
just having the patience to say thank you, is just makes it all worth it.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, everybody. Probably doesn't say it enough, but for again, all our military, our first responders, and law enforcement, thank you guys for what you do. Bernie, this has been so much fun. Thank you for sharing these stories. Is there anything or information that people where they can go to find resources about air ambulance or maybe about you? Is there anything that you wanna plug?
I work for a company called Evac Life team, and you can find information on them by just Googling Evac Life team.
Where are they headquartered at?
They're headquartered in Offland, Missouri.
Okay.
So
all right. So Air Evac Life. Go on Google. What's the website?
It's this airevaclifeteam.net or airevaclifeteam.com.
Okay. Yeah. So any information, go there. You can learn more about the company. You can learn more about the services, and hopefully maybe people like Bernie here. I don't know. I'll have to check the
And
website out.
and you can also find out about career opportunities too.
Well, there you go. So to kind of wrap up today's podcast, I mean, we know that there's a whole nother world of aviation out there besides transport. And then in the medical space, aside from your brick and mortar hospital rooms and hospital facilities, you've got this air ambulance opportunity out there. Do you guys face the same kind of staffing shortages that the aviation industry is facing? Because right now, we've got a pilot shortage, we have a maintenance technician shortage, and every other job in between. Do you guys face those challenges or struggles trying to staff flight crews?
Absolutely, we do, especially on the pilot side. That's aviation industry wide shortage of pilots. We're not too bad on med crew, but we are short on maintenance staff as well.
Why do you think that is?
Of course, military used to pump out a lot of pilots. Then they cut down the number of pilots, which cut down on the number of pilots going into the civilian sector. So I think that's a lot to do with it. The rotor wing side, you have to have 2,000 hours flight time to fly. So it's a 20-year career in Army if you don't deploy.
Yeah. So do you think that there's some regulatory things that might have to change about that? Because, I think, in my opinion, the quality of your flight time, obviously, I think weighs in a big factor. And I think it should be proficiency based, but I don't know, that's up for debate.
Yeah.
But what do you think about the hour requirements?
Actually, when I first got into being a flight medic in Tennessee, then you had to have 3,000 hours flight time. So that was a state of Tennessee requirement. The state dropped it down, but it's an industry-wide thing that you have to have usually 2,000 hours flight time. So, and like you said, quality of your flight time makes a difference. Being in the medevac unit in the Guard in Tennessee, we had heavy lift Black Hawk companies who, those guys give our pilots a hard time because they're like, well, when we deployed, we flew 1,000 hours flight time, and all you guys flew was 200-300 hours flight time, but it was completely different kind of flying and different quality of flying, as you know.
Yeah. Well, again, that's maybe up for a discussion for another time. I'd love to dive deep in with you there. But Bernie, hey man, this has been fantastic. Good catching up with you, my man.
You too, man.
Hopefully we can get discussing later, but we'll catch up later. And everybody else, have a fantastic rest of your day. Thanks for tuning in. Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening to the Jet Set podcast. You are the reason we do it, and it would seriously mean the world to us if you can go and leave a rating on iTunes. Your recommendation is the fuel that keeps us going.